It's about that time.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to City Views and our special segment, What's Cooking, with State Rep Michelle Cook. In the house. Michelle, how are you?
Doing all right, Jacque. How are you today?
I'm just trying to read your lips, man.
Oh boy. Just keep talking. We'll get it done.
Yes, we are having, let's just say, our share of technical difficulties. However, the victorious spirit of City Views is shining through once again, and we are going to get this interview done come H or high water.
Come rain or shine. And it looks like rain, so we better hurry up.
Indeed, I hear you. Now,
You know what, though, Jacque? Before you go any further, I think it's vitally important to recognize that our internet service in our area is not so good. So if we're having technical difficulties for half an hour to do a segment, could you only imagine what our students are having difficulty with trying to learn from home?
Michelle, you're spot on as usual, and I was just getting ready to bring up the fact that even though I'm in a somewhat jovial mood this afternoon, we're dealing with some very stark issues at the moment, and it puts you in a very vicarious position, Michelle, because sometimes you can't plan for these things to happen. Our weekly interview last week, just in that 7-day time period, the world has been transformed. And that affects you. It affects your job. It affects the way you interact with your constituents in a way that puts you in that very prime position to be a change agent.
Yes,
So,
that's true. It does.
I know you'll step up to the challenge, but from one friend to another, I really hope that you're in tune with the things that are taking place, and I know that you're an innovative thinker, and I know that you'll be working diligently to make sure that we come up with remedies to take care of some of the real deep societal issues that have been exposed.
I think that I don't know how many times I've said it in the last few days, but as you know, I have a 20 and a 22-year-old at home, and this generation, I think, sees things totally different than our generation or generations that are before us, our parents and our parents' parents. And it's obviously been a hot topic in my house around our table, trying to make sense of what's happening. Trying to decide what we can do to make effective change, and why is it that we have not, as a society, learned from our history books and made those changes so we don't have to keep repeating it over and over and over again? Why is it that lives are being taken away from us in senseless acts? And as I believe it was my daughter said yesterday, she says, Mom, it's interesting to see that the UConn student that killed 2 people was taken down peacefully. And you see another person treated totally different who did not commit the crimes that the UConn student did. And, I think that there's such a great disparity in how we treat each other. And I don't believe it's from all parties, and I think that that's extremely important. With everything, there is good and bad. But in this situation, the bad truly outweighs the good when it comes to how we see things and the devastation that this affects one part of our population, which in my world should be our entire population. We should be treated equally. There should be no difference. And I just don't understand why I am now 50 years old and I'm still having this conversation.
Well, yeah, I think that in generational terms, I do believe that we dealt with the issue of racism pretty effectively. Now, the way this situation has turned out and what is really exposing is institutional racism. And when I talk to some individuals, they don't understand what that concept is. Talk to our City View audience, Michelle, about that aspect of institutional racism that's so insidious and harmful to our society.
You know, when I think of institutional racism, I think that we talk about professional racism. You know, in certain professionals, in certain arenas, and you might be thinking about something totally different. But in my world, I look at where we see profiling, where we see segregation, where we see bullying, and in a lot of ways where it is allowed versus where it shouldn't be allowed. And the fact that because one person might have a different color skin than another, you are treated totally different. So if I'm looking, I mean, I respect immensely the police departments that are in our state. And quite frankly, I think there are good police departments across the country. But when we allow certain things to happen, like we've seen happen this week, and you had bystanders that allowed this to happen and did not step up, we have to deal with this, and we have to hold folks accountable, recognizing that, yes, this police officer was fired, but you had a couple, two or three other police officers that were sitting right there. Does that make them any less, or more or less accountable than the person that had his, knee on the gentleman's neck? Those are the things I don't understand. I can never say that I understand it completely. I don't live in the same type of fear that some of my friends do. And I don't understand why we're having this. This is rhetorical. I know why we're having the conversation. I think it's sad that we're still having the conversation. And if we are allowing this type of behavior to happen in certain police departments across the country, it needs to stop immediately. We need to ensure that those folks are dealt with appropriately. And we need to change the culture. I thought we were doing a better job of that. But apparently things have gone awry. And now we have the situation of protesters and the difference between, peaceful protesting and then, the sun goes down and then we have looters and violence. We really need to try to decide why we're doing what we're doing as a society. What are we standing up for? And how do we make that change? And how do we ensure that in 10, 15, or 20 years, we're not having this conversation again?
Michelle, but don't you think that it's more, this is more of a procedural issue? I mean, chokeholds are something that most people wouldn't consider that are part of some of the tactics that are allowed to be used in police departments. If you want to go back to the Michael Brown case, the unusual aspect of that situation is if I wanted to get someone's attention as an officer, it would seem to me that you would want some distance between yourself and the perp. And they were like so close in contact with each other when he first addressed him.
Right.
I mean, how is someone supposed to act? Obviously, if you're thinking in terms of your own safety, you might tend to act differently, but that's part of the problem in the Black community. And we've been talking about this infinitum for decades.
Correct.
And that level of mistrust in the community I think explains, I'm not condoning it, but it explains to some of the more outrageous behavior that the protesters are having. That
And I
level of frustration has reached the boiling point.
and
And
I
when you have so many cases that have gone unresolved in terms of accountability, that's what people are railing about.
and I don't disagree with you, but I do think that there's a line of I think there's a line of effective change and then bordering violence that is not necessary. So the Macy's and the Sephora's and the Foot Lockers, they didn't do anything to this. So we have people, small businesses that are being looted and broken into. And so you have people's livelihood, and I mean that in a world of putting food on the table and in hiring employees. And some of these employees, might be the folks that are out on the streets breaking doors and, stealing from somebody. That is what I'm saying we should not condone. I don't disagree with you in the world of standing together and marching together. They stop traffic on highways in many different states. That's getting attention. We understand why that is happening. I just think that if we're talking about making the boiling point, I hear you what you're saying about the boiling point. I have a 20-year-old son who has his best friends are from every other country than here sometimes. And he's with them all the time. I have to have a conversation with my son and say, if a police officer stops you, you need to ensure that you don't put up a fight. You need to ensure that this is my son. So it's not that this does not weigh on me in the way that it does on other parents, but it is different because I, do not have the same color skin as you might, or as my son's friends might. But I think that if we start with the violence of lighting things on fire, damaging somebody's property, my question for that is, what are you trying to get out of that? Because then we truly lose the focus, I believe, and maybe I'm totally wrong. I believe we lose the focus on what we're trying to fight for.
Well, the irony in the situation is this, Michelle, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form condoning violence, but the people that are doing it feel like that's their default position because they're not being heard. Their issues aren't being addressed. And I kind of feel like the authorities should be a little more proactive in making sure that that looting aspect of the protest and rioting aspect of the protest is diminished with their presence instead of tear gassing innocent protesters.
So I think that we're talking about the same but two separate situations, correct? So let's take the incident yesterday when in DC people were protesting peacefully outside of the presidential church, is the way that I call it in DC. And because every president has gone to service in that church.
Right.
So the protesters were outside that church protesting peacefully, harming no one. But then that element of coming in and using rubber bullets and tear gas to clear the air so the president could walk through and stand in front of a church and hold up a Bible, that brings us to a totally different conversation. And I think that those folks that allowed that to happen, that went through with rubber bullets and tear gas into a peaceful protest, that is a problem.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I'm just saying the whole aspect of Dr. King's complete belief and faith and nonviolent protesting is being smeared, and it's being done by people whose interests aren't with the interest of getting justice for the death of George Floyd.
Which goes to my point.
And
That
and
goes
that,
exactly to my point.
that's why this is more of a commentary than an interview. I do apologize, Michelle,
No. But I mean,
I haven't. I'm serious. There's a couple nights that I haven't been able to sleep because I'm putting myself in that situation. And then when you research it, and then you find, and I already know it. And some of this, you just kind of, you just put it in the back of your mind and hope you survive it and go on to the next episode. But this was so spontaneous and was a visual tsunami to the world that its impact now cannot be ignored. And I hate to that it had to take this for all this to come out. But now that it has, you can't go back.
Nor should we. And I think that it's sad, and I go back to what I said. This has been going on for generations, decades. What is wrong with us as a society when we are still having this conversation in 2020? I can't wrap my hands around this. I think is my point. It's my frustration. You sit here, and when tragedy strikes, we all try to figure out where we belong. What can we do? How do we help? What brings us together? And I just don't find us being able to figure out a way. Obviously, it hasn't worked for years and years. How do we bring us together? And there's been some incredible articles that I've been reading over the last couple of days, and just the compare and contrast, and you talk about putting the knee on the throat, and then I was reading a doctor's report where it was not only the knee on the throat that was deadly, but it was also the knees by the other officers on the parts of the legs that would not allow somebody to move. You could not defend yourself. When somebody is saying, I can't breathe, where is the humanity in continuously putting your knee on their throat so they can't breathe? Where is the humanity by keeping the knees of the other officers on the lower extremities so you can't move? And I still want to know what this gentleman did to deserve that.
Very good question, Michelle. And hopefully we'll be getting those answers sooner than later. Moving on here a bit, though, we're still in the midst of a pandemic, and people are really divided here in the state of Connecticut, Michelle, on how we should reopen. And some seem to be thinking that the governor is being a little too oppressive in some of his protocols and guidelines. And I'm just not sure how all this kind of weeds itself out in terms of how we get geared toward a big election that's coming up.
So I think that some of that's to be seen. I can't say that it's going to be a traditional campaign as normal, or election season is normal. I think a lot of it's going to be social media and online, you fill in the blank, like life has been for the last couple of months. I also think that we need to recognize that the governor has done an executive order for absentee ballots. And we need, I know that there's naysayers on this. They believe it's a way to rig elections, that it's a way to fix elections, that you fill in the blank. We need to get past that. our own Carol Anderson, to my understanding, has come out in support of saying that I don't believe that this could be fraudulent, that there is a way to do things appropriately and safely. We've had absentee balloting for a long, long time. And I think that folks deserve the right to be heard. They have the right, the constitutional right to cast a ballot. And if you do not feel that you are in a safe area, health-wise or otherwise, to be able to go to the polls, that you should be able to cast that ballot and not have voter suppression. So that will be one of the things that we continue to look forward to the upcoming general election in November. And I encourage folks to get involved and get engaged and follow candidates. If you don't know candidates, learn about them, ask questions, follow their social media presences, make phone calls, write letters. But we have to recognize that even though that we're in a pandemic, we still need to be heard. Our votes need to be cast, and these are the things that must happen in the primaries and in the general.
Absolutely right, Michelle. And as always, it's a pleasure speaking with you, and want to congratulate you on a pretty big event that just took place in your life. Would you like to share?
Which one?
Well, I think Ashlyn's graduation is worth celebrating.
Oh, that's what. Well, Ashlyn had two big events. So Ashlyn turned 22 on May 11th. And then she graduated from Mount St. Mary's University in Emmitsburg, Maryland, with a degree in business and a minor in criminal justice. And so that's big news on, in the Cook household. And obviously, unlike, like everyone else, we are not remiss to recognize that all graduates deserve a shout out, high school and senior and college graduates, and recognizing that this affects all of us. Those seniors are missing a lot of very important things that they look forward to their whole entire life. So as we're talking about my daughter, I think it's vitally important that we talk about all of the seniors, high school and college, give them a huge shout out and a congratulations, and let them know that we sympathize with the losses of all of the things that they're missing out on, but to know that there is a community behind them and that all of their achievements should not go by the wayside, that we will all figure out a way to celebrate them one way or the other. So.
Very, very well said, Michelle. Thank you very much for sharing those sentiments with our audience of City Views. In the meantime, we look forward to once again speaking with you as we do our weekly updates. And it's a pleasure having you as a contributor to the show.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege, and I'm truly blessed to be able to be a part of this. I know that we've had some internet, difficulties. But I think that just goes to show what all of our students are also dealing with, and their families and our educators,
right,
during this time. So as we learn, they learn, and I'm really hoping that we can continue the conversation, because as we know, it's vitally important to be open and honest to try to figure out things together.
Absolutely. As always, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, my friend.
Best of luck to you. See you soon.
All right. Stay safe.
All right. Yep.
Now that I actually have service.
But you're delayed talking. Now I got to read your lips.
Hello.
You're killing me.
This is why you love me.
You're killing me.
Happy Tuesday.
You're killing me. Okay. Take 3.
We are definitely Dan's Tuesday afternoon entertainment.
Dude is like, I think I'll work for this.
This is what we get. Dan, I told you, I apologized.